Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Confiance's LIMS webinar series. Today's episode is Graduating from Spreadsheets to a LIMS. I'm Matt Citardi, Manager of the Implementation Services Group here at Confience. In this episode, Rachel Monschein, Water Systems Laboratory Supervisor at the Cary Apex Water Treatment Facility, will discuss the challenges the Town of Cary, North Carolina has faced with using Excel spreadsheets for sample management. Today, we're going to cover a few topics: the limitations of using spreadsheets and key reasons the Town of Cary implemented their LIMS. Their key LIMS features, what was important to them? What were the benefits of LIMS with regulatory compliance reporting as a key need? So with that, we're going to talk about a few things, and I'd like to give some background information on Rachel. Rachel serves as the Water Systems Laboratory Supervisor, where she has managed regulatory compliance for over a decade. She earned her bachelor's degree in environmental studies with honors in biology from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. In addition to her technical expertise, Rachel is dedicated to advancing the industry. She annually instructs lab procedures at the NC Water Operators Association School and also volunteers for the NC One Water Association. So at that point, let's dive right in. Rachel, can you give us a brief overview of what Cary and Apex Water Treatment Facility does, what type of testings you have, and what your team does?
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me. Our facility provides drinking water to over 250,000 citizens in Cary, Apex, Morrisville, and parts of Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. Our laboratory is state certified so that we can be responsible for verifying that the drinking water produced meets state and federal regulations.
Now, do you deal directly with the public at all with that, or is it primarily just internal reporting?
Some public, so our citizens can contact us if they have concerns about their drinking water, and we will coordinate testing at their home.
Perfect. Awesome. And before you implemented your LIMS, what was the process for sample management? What were the limitations in the process? Was it manual, time consuming? How did that all play out?
So before we implemented our LIMS, we had Excel bench sheets that we printed, and then the analyst would manually enter the test results onto those bench sheets. And then they would type them in, looking at the bench sheet, they would type them into Access database. It was an internal, custom database that I created. And then from there, we could export the results one at a time to do our regulatory reporting or for trending.
So do you have risks of transcriptions errors? Was there any security issues, traceability issues that you ran into with Excel?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you're reading off of a printed, like a manual writing, you can say, is that a 0 or is that an 8? So there's always those handwriting issues. But then, there was also just the random mistyping. And then if you made any corrections later, there was no tracking of those corrections or audit trail type things so anyone could change the results in the database without, any.
Cool. So you had the need because of transcription errors, lack of security, lack of auditing, and things like that. What were the key reasons that you decided to implement the LIMS beyond those?
Well, I had been dreaming about having a LIMS since the 90s. I saw the benefits of it immediately and have been dreaming about it ever since. I loved every aspect, but the most important one was because it would save us time with our regulatory reporting.
So did it also help increase efficiency in the lab because you had people, not having to fill out spreadsheets constantly and going back and forth with that?
Yeah, when we were using the Access database, we would also type it in sometimes into different Excel, so we would type them into maybe 3 or 4 different places.
So there was consistency issues and going from one to the other where the data may not have matched up necessarily?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So from a LIMS perspective, you said it was a dream to get it in. So now that you have it in, what were the features? What are the key features that you saw that were not available with the old process with Excel and your old custom access-based database?
One was being able to export from our large pieces of equipment. So, when they were using the Excel, we were printing them on the large piece of equipment and then taking them over to a computer and typing them in, so now we can just export those directly into the LIMS. We also used to manually type in the results and like from contract labs. So if we send out tests frequently and we get those back, well, instead of manually typing them in, we can import those. So that'll save time and also make sure that we don't make simple mistakes like confusing perfluorooctanoic acid with perfluorosulfonic acid, so.
Right. And when you read those things through quickly, it's subject to very easy mistakes, right?
Sure, it's a headache.
Sure. And talk a little bit about sample login, the information you capture there, what that helped, collect, again, all with the eye towards the regulatory compliance piece.
Well, when we're logging in the samples, it captures information about, date and time of collection. And so we used to manually enter all of that, and now all that is captured automatically for us.
So beyond the date and time, were there other things that were important, like, who did the collection, the temperature of the samples when it arrived, locations, other metadata information that was helpful?
Yeah, you said it. Yeah, absolutely. Who collected it, the time, the temperature, that's all important.
Okay. Now, was that information that you were collecting on the Excel spreadsheets manually before, or was that information not even collected?
Oh, it was written on paper and then typed in. Yeah, typed into, I think might have been just a reporting portal, but.
Okay. Okay. So again, the reinforcing the issue of a lot of paper, a lot of rewriting of information, and your gains of the efficiency of the LIMS because everything was done electronically for you, digitally for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did it help with auditing as well of the data, at least internal auditing?
Well, with the state auditing, that was great because we were worried initially that they would want to see paper because that's what we're accustomed to providing. And, I did make sure that our auditors were on board with the transition before we implemented, but still we hadn't made it through an audit yet. And so there was some anxiety there. But the auditor met with us in our conference room, and, it used to be that we had to go one file cabinet to the next file cabinet to pull these out and, walk all over the lab. And, it took a lot longer. And now it was all electronic and, large on the conference room, board. And so it was obvious, it was easy and a lot smoother than we had hoped.
So in that case, when you were going through the audit, you basically had the system pulled up, and if they looked for data, you were able to query and get the records that they were interested in seeing.
Well, actually, we had changed. So we now we're currently using the exact same bench sheets that we were using that were printed in Excel, but we're using the Excel version of it instead of paper copy, and then we can upload it to LIMS. But so the auditor, what we're showing them is our exact same bench sheet. It's just a digital form, and we save them as not uneditable PDFs that are signed, and so we can display them in a way that our auditors are used to seeing and that our analysts are used to defending. But then the data is uploaded with Excel Express to the LIMS, and so it really satisfies the auditors and also, has all the other benefits of a laboratory information management.
So did all of that help instill confidence also for the lab personnel internally as well as the auditors in that case? Because it was a comfort level in what they were seeing. They saw the validity of the data. They saw the confidence in the data.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, all of your QC data is on the bench sheet, and we've programmed the Excel to change colors so that, your calculations for your relative percent difference or your percent recoveries and, all that will change colors if they're exceed any limits that you have set. And so it's real obvious to the auditor that indefensible.
And they got immediate feedback as the results were being entered, right, with the color changes and whatnot.
That's right. And you can even change the color of your test results. So if you have a new analyst who isn't used to seeing, what's normal, they could have an abnormal result and not even realize it. So the color coding is good for everyone.
Awesome. Good to hear. Good to hear. Now, talk a little bit about dashboard integration, where you were doing some trending and the real-time results piece of that.
Yeah, that's our latest thing that we've just added, and it's exciting. So we've got an API from our LIMS where we're pulling the data, and then we're able to filter it and bring it into Power BI, where we've created a dashboard, and we've got all the data from our distribution system it's actually posted on an internal website, and that updates automatically several times a day. And so we can trend the results, and again, anything that's abnormal will alert you by turning yellow or red. And we've got several different dashboard pages, I guess, similar to the workbook in Excel, where you can click on it and see, let's look at the nitrification concerns, or let's look at the town of Apex, or let's look at town of Cary, and everything is easy to show how many tests have they collected this month versus how many are required. And we've got it mapped out where you can see which ones have been collected versus which ones haven't. And, that way the samplers can schedule their routes more efficiently. And
is that used throughout the lab, or is it?
Yeah, it's used for our lab. So anyone can have it with the, Town of Cary employee with the internet connection. So you can use it on your phone, or you can use it on, a computer.
Nothing like being in Starbucks and being able to know what samples you're missing, right?
That's right.
So we talked a little bit about the limits and how you got, alerts in real time when results entered. How did this change how you reported? I know you talked about, the auditing, pulling the files was much quicker, but how did reporting change for you?
Well, we used to have to manually type in addition to typing the data into the Access database, we also had to manually type the data into a state's portal website. And they also had to capture who collected it, at what time did they collect it, what was the temperature and the chlorine at the time of collection, and what time did you start analysis, what time did you end analysis. And so it took, for over 200 samples, it took 4 days basically to type in all that data. And now it takes, less than 4 hours to do all of that, plus the additional reports that we also do for regulatory purposes.
Yeah, that's quite a cost savings. Now, did that help increase your throughput in the lab? Did it help reduce, the stress level of everyone doing the testing, because they had a little more time now to focus on actually doing the testing work as opposed to the reporting pieces?
Yeah, we're able to do fun stuff like the dashboard implementation and, things like that. So
okay, awesome. So what are the key benefits that you experienced and that the lab experienced? You talked about reduced manual entry, right? We talked about maximizing resources. Has it helped from a time savings in general, in turnaround times in the lab?
You just have to be ready to put in the workload initially before you can start, really showing that time savings.
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah. And then another thing we haven't talked about is years ago we had a sampler who was doing unethical things, and we ended up being in violation because he was collecting multiple samples from one location and filling out fake information to accompany that. So another feature that we really like is with the geofencing. So, we've set up the iMobile which is the interface they can use in the field. We set that up to only allow data entry if they're within, a particular distance of the sample site. So that's protecting us for, preventing unethical behavior from our samplers.
And I imagine obviously that also increases confidence in the data that you're reporting, right? Because you've got guardrails in place to ensure that the data that's generated is indeed accurate and based on the location it should have been taken from.
That's right.
Yep. Okay. And you've integrated with other software products?
Well, with the Power BI, that's what we're using for our dashboard.
Is that something you run internally?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's cool. Awesome. Now, reporting. Do you do reports on a more manual basis, or is it more on an automated basis where they're scheduled? How are the reports shared within Cary?
So the regulatory ones, they're done with using one steps in the Excel Express, where we pull the data out of Sample Master, and that's manually done. You know, I usually do those once a month.
Okay. And those were things that were taken, of course, much longer period of time, prior to LIMS.
That's right.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Any other thoughts, about the LIMS in general, the entire process, the journey? You called out that you have to endure a little bit of work initially, right? To
Yeah.
get up to speed, to get a control of your processes, to know how you're implementing things.
Mm.
Can you talk to that for a moment?
Yeah, I would say we really didn't understand LIMS in general when we first started implementing it, so we didn't know about the life of a sample. Like logging in and it moving into, well, I guess pre-log versus log, and then all the different stages and the data entry portion. And I don't know, that took a little adjustment. Um,
Overall, I would assume you felt it was worth the effort.
oh, absolutely. I definitely. We're still now. The next adventure for us is our operators are going to be taking over. So they're also going to be entering all of their lab data into Excel and then uploading it into LIMS. And then when we pull the data for our monthly report, we won't be just pulling the lab data. We'll also be pulling the operator data. And it'll be so much nicer when, if they have any questions about our lab data, they know the system now, so they can look at it to see it. And if we have any questions about the process data from what the operators perform, we can easily look at that. And our reports for, like, consumer confidence report, which is done once a year, or we have like I guess we're going for like performance, like awards and things like that, where we need to pull a bunch of data that'll all be in one place. So that's our next adventure.
That sounds great.
So, forgot to mention one other thing.
Yeah.
So we used to manually count how many tests each analyst did each month, and then how many of those tests were within the QC, did their QC work, and how many of those failed, and that type of thing. And now we've got our LIMS system counting that for us, so that we can do performance measures. So when you're looking at doing your evaluations for merit increases and things, you can look and see how many tests did this person do in the last 6 months or a year, and how many of their quality control were within range, and just to give you a little bit of ammunition or whatever you need to allow them to a good review, or perhaps some reprimand, but hopefully a good review.
Right. And you don't typically think about that as what the LIMS would get you, is the ability to help in that area. But the more information you have, right, the more data you have, the more informed your decisions are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really good to hear. Well, I thank you very, very much for the time. I thank everyone for tuning into this webinar. If you enjoyed the episode, you can certainly stay up to date on future recordings by following our LinkedIn company page. And if you'd like to learn more about how your lab can streamline operations and improve quality standards, go ahead and request a demo on our website at www.confience.io. That is www.confience.io. Again, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you in the future.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.